Today we're going to be doing a lesson on operations of functions. We're going to add, subtract, multiply, and divide functions. As we start looking at number 1, the first thing we see is that it says add. Adding functions is not new. We've done it before, but adding and using this kind of notation is new. Notice it says function f plus function g, and then it's got the x outside, and we could say of x. So you would read that as f plus g of x. And so what we're going to do is we're basically going to take the f function, add it to the g function, and we're going to have an x in it. So the f function I'm going to pull is 2x minus 1 because I'm looking up here, and the g function is 3x. I'm going to add 3x. Usually I do like to put things in parentheses when I substitute in. When we add, there's not a problem when we add, so I can just go ahead and add my like terms. When you add like terms, remember you're only going to add those coefficients or the numbers in front. So if I add 2x's and 3x's, I end up with 5x's. Minus 1 because minus 1 is the only number I have. Final answer for the function f plus g of x is 5x plus or minus 1. Okay, subtract. We're going to subtract, and order is definitely important. I'm going to take function f, which is the 2x minus 1 function, and I'm going to take function j, which is 4x minus 2 function, and I'm going to subtract them. Notice that there's a big subtraction right in the center. So we are subtracting functions. Now, just to brush up on what to do, this is an important note slide I made, just to make sure. We'll go back to problem in just a second. But let's just make sure that we remember to change the signs of everything in parentheses after a subtraction sign. So notice right here in this real quick example, I do have a subtraction sign. That means that everything after the subtraction sign is going to change the sign. One way to think of it is you could pretend there's a -1, and you're going to multiply through the first and the second and the third. If I just look at what I have inside parentheses, okay, I'll put a bracket around it for now. That subtraction is going to change the sign. So what looks like a positive 5x squared is going to become a negative 5x squared. What looks right now to be minus 8x is going to become a plus 8x. And what looks like a minus 3 is going to end up being plus 3. So if you can imagine, or if you can remember, anything after the subtraction sign in parentheses, the sign gets changed to opposite, then you'll be good. So if we just finish this real quick example, we'll go back and finish the other problem on our sheet. You do not have this one on your sheet. It's just extra. 2x squared, negative 5x squared. If I subtract or add those, I end up with a negative 3x squared. Notice I'm only adding or subtracting the numbers in front. 3x and 8x is 11x. And in this case, I have plus 3 plus 5, which is plus 8. Again, the important part is, please make sure, if you have a subtraction sign in front of parentheses, make sure that you change the sign of everything in the parentheses. That's very, very important. Now, since we reviewed that, we do know that we're going to have, inside the parentheses, I see a positive 4x. That's going to become minus 4x. Inside the parentheses, I see minus 2. That's going to become plus 2. And I'm dropping my parentheses because now I have changed my signs. 2x minus 4x. That's going to be negative 2x when I combine terms. I'm only adding or subtracting the coefficients or the numbers in front. Then I have minus 1 plus 2, and the answer is going to be plus 1. Okay? So the function f minus function j of x has got an x in my final answer. Now we're going to subtract g minus f. Order is important, so g comes first, 3x, minus f of x, which is 2x, minus 1. Okay, some people like to do a shortcut way. You'll notice that in your parentheses, I have a positive 2x. That's going to become minus 2x. My negative 1 or subtract 1 is going to become plus 1. Then I can drop my parentheses. So when you change your signs, you can drop your parentheses. Now I'm going to end up with 1x plus 1, or just x plus 1. Notice that it says of x, and x appears in my final answer. When multiplying x terms, follow the mama rule. Let's just review what the mama rule is. This is a rule that I've heard some teachers teach. I know that some students understand it already. But if you multiply, let's just say 3x squared times 4x to the 5th, the mama rule says multiply the big numbers. The big numbers are 3 and 4. So if you multiply 3 times 4, you're going to get 12. Okay? Then what we're going to do is we're going to add littles. Adding littles is the exponent. So we're going to add the littles. Add the little numbers, which are your exponent numbers. And if you add those exponent numbers, you're going to get 2 plus 5, which is 7. All right, so my final answer is 3 times 4 is 12. I still have x. X to the 2 plus 5 is 7. 12, x to the 7. I've multiplied bigs, added littles. Okay, that's the mama rule. We use that a lot when we're multiplying and we have x's and numbers. All right. Here, let's start. We're going to take g function times the f function. G function, I believe, is 3x. The f function is 2x plus 1. Okay, is that right or is it minus? Oh, it's minus. All right. When we multiply and we only have one term in the front, we're going to distribute. So 3x is going to be multiplied by the first, and 3x is also going to be multiplied by the last term. 3x times 2x. 3 times 2 is 6. That's x to the first and x to the first, which will be x to the second. 3x times minus 1 is going to be minus 3x. This says of x, and I have x's in my answer. Next one, f times j. Notice that this, if I just make sure that we know, that is a multiplication dot. And a multiplication dot always stands for multiplication. So anytime you see that just dot kind of hanging in the air there, that means to multiply. So I'm going to take the f function, which is 2x minus 1. Okay. And I'm going to take the j function, which is 4x minus 2. And I'm going to multiply. Notice that I do not have a sign in the middle. Up here, I had a plus sign. Here, I had a subtraction sign. Here, I had a plus sign. Here, I had a subtraction sign in between parentheses. Here, there's nothing but a dot or nothing at all. And if you have nothing at all, it still means multiply. This is a binomial. We're going to multiply a binomial times a binomial. We have prefixes that we need to learn. Bi is a prefix that means 2. So I have 2 terms in this parenthesis that's going to be multiplied by 2 terms in that parenthesis. And typically, if you multiply 2 things times 2 things, you're going to end up with 4 terms or 4 things. We're going to use the FOIL method to do this, or we're going to lobster claw it. Depending on what teacher you had, you might have heard them talk about one or the other. Basically, I'm going to do the FOIL method or lobster claw. It's the same thing. We're going to take 2x and we're going to distribute 2x to everything in the other parenthesis. 2x times 4x and 2x times negative 2. If I do that, I'll get the first 2 answers. So 2x times 4x is 8x squared. 2x times negative 2 is negative 4x. Notice that when I did the 2x times the 4x, that was actually the first ones times the first ones. First ones times the first ones. And when I did the 2x times the minus 2, those are the ones on the outside edges. So the ones on the outside edges, that's my O. So I actually did FO, and that's where I got these terms and these terms. Okay, or it forms the top of the lobster claw. Now I'm going to multiply everything by negative 1. Negative 1 times 4x is negative 4x. That's actually the ones on the inside. They're on the inside. Okay. The inner terms. Then I'm going to take negative 1 times negative 2, and a negative times a negative is positive 2, and those are the last one in the parentheses times the last one in the parentheses. Notice that I ended up with 4 terms just as we predicted. Okay? All right. I can combine like terms. 8x squared is the only x squared term. Negative 4x, negative 4x, negative 8x plus 2. Final answer is a trinomial, which has 3 terms. Just a little vocabulary. The prefixes are kind of important. All right, we're going to divide, but don't worry, we're not going to really do a whole lot with divide. If I take the f function, it's going to have to be in the top. So if I pull out the f function, I get 2x minus 1. And if I go find the g function and put it on the bottom, I get 3x. Notice this says of x, so it's f divided by g of x. Well, I put the f function on top and I put the g function on the bottom. There's really nothing I can do to simplify that any further, so I'm going to leave it just like that. If we could divide it, we would. We can't, so we're just going to stop. 6b is 3 times function f of x. So the f of x function is 2x minus 1. So all we're really doing is multiplying everything by 3. 3 times 2x is 6x, and 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. So the answer to that little problem would be 6x minus 3. All right. Again, that was our notes for subtraction. Now we're going to do the same things that we just did, only now we're going to see numbers. I have numbers in the of part. So what we're going to do first is we're still going to add, we're still going to subtract, we're still going to subtract, we're still going to multiply, just like we did a couple of seconds ago. Now we're going to do it with a number instead of just x. So I'm going to grab f and g, 2x minus 1, add it to 3x. I think we did that already. We have like terms, we'll get 5x minus 1. But because this says of 5, what we're going to do now is we're going to substitute 5 in for x. That's what we learned how to do in the last unit. F of x is function notation, and what's in the parentheses is my input. So it's going to be 5 times some number minus 1, and that number is 5. So 5 times 5 is 25 minus 1. The final answer becomes 24. So starting here, if you'll see my little note on the side right here, starting here, all of these answers will be numbers. That's because all of the of parts are now numbers and not letter x. Subtract. Again, we said order is important, so f has to be mentioned first, so 2x minus 1. Subtract g of x, which is 3x. Since there's only one expression, it's really going to be 2x minus 1. That does make that a negative 3x. Like terms is negative 1x minus 1. What are we doing this time? It says of negative 6, negative 7. Negative 7 gets replaced right here, so I have negative 7 in place. So I have negative 1 out front minus 1. When you multiply, you get positive 7 minus 1. Final answer becomes 6. So if I have a number, I'll subtract, put it in there. G function, 3x, minus the f function, 2x minus 1. Remember, I said order is important, so make sure g comes first and f comes second. Now, it's got a subtraction in the center. Please notice, if there's a subtraction there, what's going to happen to everything in parentheses? It's going to change to opposite. So that's going to make it like minus 2x, and that's going to become plus 1. Now, I've gotten rid of my parentheses. I get x plus 1, but it didn't say of x. It says of 0. So put a 0 here, 0 plus 1. Final answer for that problem is 1. Multiply f times g, 2x minus 1 times g, which is 3x. We have done this problem a little bit earlier, but 3x was in the front. It still does not matter. This has to be multiplied by the first, and this has to be multiplied by the second. So 3x is distributed to 2x, and I get 6x squared. Mama rule. Multiply bigs, add littles. Those are like x to the firsts. Minus 3x. And again, this doesn't say of x. It says of 4. The only thing you got to remember is this time you got x in 2 places. So I'm going to have 6 times something squared minus 3 times something. And that number that I'm putting in here this time is 4. I always do the exponent part first. So I'm going to get 6 times 16 minus 3 times 4 is 12. That turns out to be 9 is 6 minus 12, which is 84. Final answer is 84. Multiply g times h. The g function, 3x. The h function turns out to be x squared plus 1. We do have to remember to distribute, so I'm going to take 3x to the first term and 3x to the second term. I'm also going to do the mama rule. That's like a 1. 3 times 1 is 3. X to the first times x to the second is x to the third plus, and then 3x times 1 is 3x. Again, it doesn't say of x, it says of negative 2. So now I'm going to put a negative 2 here and a negative 2 there. 3 times something cubed plus 3 times something, and that something is -2. So I'm going to put -2 here and here. Always go to your exponent part first. Negative times negative times negative turns out to be -8. And then that's going to be -6. I get -24, and that's going to be like -6, -30 is your final answer. All right, we did say that when divide, we don't end up doing a lot, but the f function is 2x minus 1. The g function on the bottom is 3x. Now, we did that problem earlier. It's listed up there in one of the other problems. But this time it says of what? Of 3. So 3 is going to go in here and here. So I get 2 times minus 1 and 3 times. So when I fill in my numbers, I get 3 and 3. 2 times 3 minus 1 is 5. And 3 times 3 on the bottom is 9. 5 ninths does not reduce. Final answer. All right. I do have 3 extra problems that are not listed on your original sheet. I added these, but then I copied the wrong page. So please bear with me. Either at the bottom of the sheet you have, or even on another piece of paper, please watch as we go through these, because you will see some of these show up in your homework set. All right, this again, multiplication dot. Please pay attention. It didn't say multiply this time, it just said find. So when I see the multiplication dot, I know that I'm going to multiply these. So I'm multiplying c, which is 3x squared, y to the 5th. And I'm going to multiply it times the d function, and it's going to have an x in it. Okay, this one says of x. So I'm going to have to multiply all of this term, and it's one term, so it is a monomial, but it has 3 parts, a number, an x letter, and a y letter. So I'm going to multiply it by the first, and I'm going to multiply all that times the second. I'm going to do the mama rule. 3 times 4 becomes 12. X to the second and x to the first becomes x to the third. Y to the 5th doesn't have another y, but I still have to keep it in my answer. Plus 3 times 5 becomes 15. I don't have an x and a y term to add anything to, so I just have to carry x squared y to the 5th through in my answer. Okay. Now we're going to add, and I want you to notice that this is actually written differently. So it's a little bit different notation, but it's still a notation that means what? Do a sum or do what? Add. So I'm going to take the d function and add it to the e function. So the d function is 4x plus 5. Add that to the e function, which is 2x squared plus 3x minus 5. So when I add my two functions, I don't have to worry about anything with add. As long as it's add in the middle, I'm just going to add like terms. 4x and 3x are alike. 2x squared is kind of the only thing that's like an x squared, and that's actually going to be my biggest term, my biggest power of x. It's going to be my first term. Now let's do the 4x times the 3x and get 7x. And as it turns out, plus 5 minus 5, those end up canceling because those are going to end up equaling 0. So this is my final answer when I add my terms. All right, this is the going to also be a multiply problem. Notice that right here I'm picking up on the fact that that's a multiplication dot, so I know I'm supposed to multiply. Order is important, so I'm going to do d first. 4x plus 5. And e function is 2x squared plus 3x minus 5. And we're going to pause here because now if we take a look, we have two expressions in here. We have a binomial in the first parenthesis because it has two terms, a bi. This one in the second parenthesis, though, has 3 terms. We call that a trinomial. Usually if you multiply something that's got 2 parts times something that's got 3 parts, your answer is going to turn out to have what? 6 parts or 6 terms. We're going to end up doing what's called a monster claw. We're still going to evenly distribute the parts. 4x. 4x is in the first parenthesis, and it's going to be distributed to the second parenthesis. Then it's going to be the first thing, it's going to be multiplied to the second thing in those parentheses, and the third thing in the other parentheses. So let's see what we end up with. 4x squared and 2x squared, I get 8. Multiply bigs, add littles, and I get x to the third. 4x times 3x, when we did our 3x, I'm going to get 12. 3 times 4 is 12. X times x is x squared. Now I'm going to do 4x times negative 5. 4x times negative 5 is negative 20, and it has an x on it. Everything in my top parenthesis has been multiplied by 4x. Now I'm going to distribute 5 times everything in the second parenthesis. 5 times 2x squared is 10x squared. 5 times 3x is 15x. And then 5 times negative 5 turns out to be negative 25. And I'll have to squeeze that in there. Notice that when I count, 1, 2, 3 came when I distributed the first term. 4, 5, 6, the last 3 came when I distributed the last term. To finalize this up, I'm going to combine like terms. That's the only x to the third I have. I do have 12x squared and 10x squared for 22x squared. And then I have minus 20 plus 15 would be minus 5x. And then minus 25 is the only number I have without an x. So that's my final answer. Sometimes people call this the monster claw because it kind of looks like it's got a huge, like a lobster claw on steroids sometimes, or even I think it kind of looks like a clam's shell put together. This is your lesson. We added, subtracted, multiplied, and divided functions.